Hi, and welcome to the Badaboom podcast. On today's episode, Chris and I talk about directors trying to grab their own piece of the DCEU while we await new leadership at Warner Brothers. Listen in to hear our thoughts.
Hey guys, welcome to the Badaboom podcast.
Welcome.
It is finally 15 years in the making. It's Black Adam week.
15.
And 15 years, I remember looking at the old version of IGN and being on comingsoon.net and them talking about a Black Adam movie with The Rock. And now we're here,
Yeah. Well, I mean, which one took longer, Chinese Democracy or Black Adam?
I wouldn't really get into that, but yeah, before they banned this podcast. But yeah, it's been a long time coming. With that, there was a huge article that dropped a couple days ago, and by a couple days, it probably was yesterday. But when you're listening to this, it's a couple days ago. Speaking about the state of DC, it's in the Hollywood Reporter, and it talks about The Rock himself is kind of spoiled. The big surprise in Black Adam, we won't spoil it here, but the article talks about what went into making that happen. And now that there's a void in leadership, Walter Hamada is out as the head of DC. Dan Lin had to turn down the role of being their Kevin Feige. Now, it's kind of a free for all. So you have all these people, all these Hollywood players, vying for their piece, you know what I mean, of the DCEU, so that they could get their projects made before someone with a plan comes along and is like, hey, this doesn't make much sense. So it was cool. It felt good because it felt like, hey, like there's some really cool projects in the works. But, with DC, anytime there's good news, you're always like, hey, what's the other that's going to drop? Yeah. Where's that dead body they're going to find on Ezra Miller's estate?
Oh, wow. Talking about getting banned on this podcast.
Yeah. But, those are the kind of things you expect because, I forget when it was. Oh, yeah. When they dropped I think it was, the trailer where they were like, 2022's the year of heroes. And then like immediately a week later, it was like, hey, I know we said that, but what we meant was 2022 was the year of delays. What we meant was, I know what we said, but what we meant. So yeah, what do you think? I know I sent the article to you. We've had these discussions, and because of the state of DC and Warner Brothers Discovery, it feels like almost every month we're talking about a new direction they're going in. So what did you think about the article?
I thought it was interesting that there's so many people trying to grab like a piece of the Warner Brothers or the DC universe. Like they're really trying to carve out maybe their own little universe in the side, because Matt Reeves is going to keep doing his Batman stuff. The Rock is trying to push for more Black Adam. Shazam is on its way to have 3 movies, so it doesn't seem like any of it's going to connect anytime soon. And for some of these directors, I guess it does give them some creative freedom because they know maybe they think they're not going to be restrained by other movies or other things in a universe that they'll have to kind of play rules by. And maybe they feel like they can be like, cool, I can tell a great superhero story, and that'll be an achievement of mine. But overall, hopefully it'll make them money. Hopefully it makes DC money and it fuels the machine. But overall, like, it's just like we're not really contributing to anything that's going to provide like a larger continuity. And we might see some of those great shots where it's like Superman and Shazam fighting Black Adam, or just like those classic things you see in the DC universe, where when you think of like iconic DC covers or iconic DC moments and things like that, like maybe it'll lead to that, but it's like we only had one movie about it as opposed to like 3 or 4 movies building up and feeling really invested with these characters. Like I think of Civil War, Captain America. The movie was such a good movie because we had all these characters previously in it, and we were introducing new characters here and there, but the whole universe was like kind of building up to this moment. And we had so much continuity between those projects that every single movie felt like it was going to be as big as Civil War kind of was. And now it's kind of just going to be like, my impression of what it's going to be going forward is either I really like this producer or I really like these characters, or I've read the comics. It's not going to be something where it's like, I have to go watch 5 other movies and feel very invested. It's just like, all right, cool. I can go in and see this movie and it's going to be okay. It's not going to be great, but at least it's getting made. It's like, I feel like that's the kind of attitude I'll potentially have. Like, nothing's made, but that's just what I feel like we're setting up the DCEU for at the moment.
That's fair. What's interesting about The Rock is that he almost feels like they're Kevin Feige in a lot of ways. You know, he's an entertainer. He's a showman, so he's trying to sell a fight. He's selling pay-per-views. He's telling people, "Hey, you know, this is the movie. You need to listen to the fans." Obviously, he put a lot into this to get this made, to make sure that it highlights the DCEU. Even though I'm a little disappointed that he's not going to be facing off with Shazam. You know, it's crazy that we're getting the Justice Society on screen. This is the one movie that probably has the most connections to the DCEU because you have Jennifer Holland's character from Peacemaker. I forget her name, Harcourt. She's
Yeah.
appearing. You have obviously there's a big surprise at the end of it that has been spoiled over and over again by The Rock and articles suggesting the future of that said character. There's obviously Amanda Waller,
Yeah.
and there's other things that we'll probably see that are connected in some ways, like maybe Accord Industries or, certain things that also the history of the Justice Society. So I think they're aiming towards that. And The Rock has said this, he wants this to feel like phase one, and him saying that obviously implies that he's Iron Man. But I don't think anyone sees Black Adam as that, but you do respect it. The movie, the effects, the production value looks amazing. And to your point, and I think it's in Warner Brothers, DNA, pre Justice League and Suicide Squad to give filmmakers, to invest in filmmakers, not really the brands and IP. Is like, hey, you give us the pitch, let's let a filmmaker and a storyteller tell their story. That's how we get something like Aquaman. That's how we get, the Batman. The Batman's wholly like a Matt Reeves vision. And now we're, potentially going to get a Clayface film, a Professor Pig. You got the Penguin show popping off pretty soon. So there's excitement around that, and I actually like that approach because I do feel that the Marvel approach, we've gotten to the point, and yeah, we had like 10 years of great storytelling, and it was unique. But eventually, where that leads is to a place where they're putting out so much stuff, a lot of it becomes forgettable and missable.
I think that's where I have to have a little bit more perspective because like those 10 years where Marvel was great, we didn't have like Netflix was barely a thing. No one was making the only people that were making like superhero TV shows was the CW. And we were just happy because that's what we had. And then once Marvel was able to do it better with movies, then we were like, that's all we want. And it's just a different platform and different terrain now when it comes to how people consume content, and so it's a lot harder. Also, just seeing how far Marvel's come with their plans, it's a lot harder to be able to say, yeah, we can start at year one with where Marvel was with DC, because there's just so much other ways of consuming media and such higher expectations for a universe to get built. So it is a little unreasonable to hold DC or expect DC to kind of play to that standards, and investing in filmmakers to tell the good stories is what we all ultimately want. We'll just probably lack that continuity.
They've tried to microwave this before. This is something you really have to smoke, if that makes sense. You don't put barbecue in the microwave. This is something you have to kind of like really put out there for like 12 hours and put in the work, because the reason you go see an Ant-Man is because you have 8 years of established like, hey, the Marvel brand is great. I'll go in, I'll watch this. I know there's a high floor to this. Whereas with DC, you never know what you're gonna get. It's really like Russian roulette.
Yeah.
Like if Black Adam was a part of a larger cinematic universe and we had built to it with other movies, instead of kind of being like, hey, this movie's happening and we want to connect it, so we're gonna put things in it, but really nothing's been. Even the Shazam movie does a pretty poor job of setting up this movie because it's like, hey, we referred to it, but these characters are not connected. in any significant way, which is obviously disappointing. But hopefully they realize that there is no savior, there is no Kevin Feige coming to their door. No one's there's only one of those. So you might as well just invest in filmmakers, great storytellers. You have great characters. There's characters that haven't been on screen, like a Dr. Fate that's showing up and Black Adam. Just do that. Just give people what they want. Not wholly, because I think only listening to the fans is a bad strategy. We've seen how that kind of works sometimes. But play to your paying customers. Like, hey, like people will buy this. People will buy a Superman movie with Henry Cavill. People will buy other things. So why are we trying to reinvent things that we haven't even taken advantage of? So they're trying
Yeah.
to have different iterations of things when they haven't even established like a good solid classic version of it, which sucks. But it is one of those things where you read and you're like, hey, is someone leaking this because they want people to know everything's going to be fine? But it is good to hear good things like James Gunn pitching a new DC movie that maybe not tied to Peacemaker and the Suicide Squad. It'll be cool to see his vision of something. Like, I would love that. And we talked about this before, like a Booster Gold, Blue Beetle, James Gunn movie would be perfect, and we wouldn't need any build up to that. Just give it tomorrow and just cancel Guardians 3 and just do that. So there's a lot to be excited for, but we've been through this cycle a lot where it's like every 6 months there's like, hey, by the way, we're not crazy. There's a plan. We have people that are listening and all that. And who knows, if Black Adam flops, we might be here again in 6 months
Yeah, that's
with
true.
another article being like, hey, that didn't work, but now we got someone that's going to make it work.
Yeah, I have a lot of hope because the fans very much want Henry Cavill to come back as Superman. And it seems that's something that DC is also wanting. And I think maybe like one great Superman movie, like a Man of Steel 2, which they kind of allude to in the article, or another. I don't think we need to keep having movies that are really just Superman versus this person, like Batman versus Superman. Like, we had one of those, that's enough. But another Superman team up movie, essentially, his name doesn't need to be in the title for it. But I think like DC knows, and they're right. I think they're right on the money. Like, we need to have more Superman. He's like the most iconic character we have, apart from Wonder Woman and Batman. And we've been milking Batman for so long, and Gal Gadot is slated for Wonder Woman 3. So we need to just really dig in and use Superman more, and it'll kind of come back and become more of a brand that people want to work with.
No, for sure. And, you have to bring back confidence, not just for consumers, but also your partners. A lot of people are upset about the Batgirl cancellation. And, there's probably not a lot of people vying for that DC job because they're like, hey, Warner Brothers Discovery will probably be sold again in a year. Why am I going to go? Why am I going to go into a job where I know I'm going to lose it? All my ideas will never see the light of day because, these plans, like Kevin Feige's grand plan to almost 15 years. You know what I mean? So if you can't plan 1 year ahead, literally the people that were making decisions, the people that greenlit Batgirl are never going to see it.
Yeah.
It's been erased. They're never going to see it. The plans they had after Batgirl, they're never going to see it. So, I think they have to right the ship in order to get someone like a Dan Lin to come in and be like, hey, I'm willing to put all my other projects to the side that are, solid to work with you guys who seem to not have anything going. But we're a DC podcast at this point. We're going to change it, so we're always going to talk about it and be hopeful in a lot of ways, but present that real perspective of like, hey, the checks have to be written for these things to get made, and if the company's not healthy, we're never going to see these things.
Yeah.
Black Adam alone, who's not really a A-list character yet, that's a $200 million movie. The Flash is so expensive, they can't, they literally have to release it. They can't, like, no matter what Ezra Miller does, short of killing someone, they're going to release it. They're going to be like, hey, apologize. and we're not going to put you on the press tour, but this movie has to come out or we will have to shut down this company.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the article kind of also mentions there's just so many directors grabbing for certain characters. Is there a director that you'd like to see paired with a specific character to give more back to like the DC universe with everyone trying to carve up their own kind of space?
Well, it was mentioned in the article, but Christopher McQuarrie, who's directed the last few Mission Impossibles, directed Fallout with Henry Cavill. Like his name has been attached to a potential Superman movie with Henry Cavill, and I'd love to see that. That's someone who's written really great films, who's directed some really great action films, obviously has a relationship with Cavill, and I just want to see a good Superman movie. I'm not the biggest Superman fan, but at this point, it's kind of insane that like I've seen more Iron Man films than Superman movies. Granted that character was elevated in a lot of ways, but it makes no sense that the first superhero feels like, hey, like maybe we'll figure it out. We actually might see a second Constantine movie before we see another Superman movie,
Yeah.
which is like crazy when you think about it. And I said it out loud and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, because they say they didn't they get canceled in the article?
No, the Constantine show that J.J. Abrams was producing and stuff.
Oh,
And part
okay.
of why that was canceled was because Keanu Reeves and Francis Lawrence, who, did the original Constantine movie, that's another thing. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that was announced. I don't think we've talked about that lately. But it goes to show you DC's all over the place.
Exactly.
Like, hey, that movie came out like 17 years ago. What's that connected to?
Nothing.
It's basically, hey, anyone that's had a passion project or anything around a DC character is just going to Warner Brothers and being like, hey, I guess there's no boss here. Here's a script. Just sign that check. But yeah, I mean that's a great question. Like I said, I would love to see a good Superman movie where he actually punches something. That would be really cool, and we get to the focus on him. People keep saying Man of Steel 2, Man of Steel 2. Batman versus Superman is technically a Man of
Yeah,
Steel sequel,
it
and
really
he's
is.
barely in the theatrical cut. So I would love a Superman sequel where it's just about Superman. They could even get rid of his supporting cast, like it's just Superman and whoever he's gonna go up against. And we don't need anyone else. Just we've gotten all that. I think Lois is actually in Batman versus Superman more than Superman.
Yeah, he has like the least amount of dialogue.
No, he says like 5 words.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a love hate relationship with that movie, especially
Yeah.
the Ultimate Cut. But what is there one on the top of your head or one that you really feel if you were the head of DC, if you were Dan Lin when he's going to take that job, who's the first person you're calling to ask them for a pitch?
I'm not sure who I would call, but I think that if we're not really going to dive into, or if we're not really going to commit to continuity or a large amount of continuity, and we just want to tell great stories, I'd say, who can give me a great DC detective movie featuring The Question? Who can give me a great spy movie featuring Deathstroke? Because those are, and I know Deathstroke was pitched and then they got scrapped and then they came back and said we can do the Joker, and like look how great the Joker's been. So it's one of those movies where it's like people either like that villain enough or like that character enough that it will just sell and it'll be great. And if you make it a great movie, cool, it's even better. And with The Question, it's like the Batman movie. The Batman movie to me, like if the Batman was just a ex detective that they called in when they needed extra help and they can't solve things, it would still be a great movie. And like if you did the same kind of like feel that Matt Reeves has done with the Batman, but like with The Question, with like huge conspiracies or something like that that happen like in the DC universe, then
Yeah, who is ruining the DC universe? Let's just put the question Vic Sage in Warner Brothers Discovery's offices. He's an employee that works there, and then slowly but surely he realizes that it's eating itself from the inside. The killer is inside the house, and he's just got his his big whiteboard with red yarn and I think that would be a perfect meta way to tackle it, and a way to apologize for years of ineptitude when it comes to creating this. But, it's hard to blame them. They've been bought like 2-3 times, could be sold again in the near future. So, I definitely feel for those people. They're doing the best they can under the circumstances. But, as fans, you do want to see them do better.
Yeah, I'll be thankful for anything they're able to give us because I know it takes a lot of hard work and time and dedication. And when the attention that's needed for these projects isn't able to be given or isn't affordable, the fact that we're kind of just getting anything is much appreciated.
Yeah. And just like this podcast. Yeah. So with that, guys, bada boom.
Bada boom.
Thank you for listening to the Badaboom podcast. Keep the conversation going on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Get in the comments on our YouTube channel and let us know what you'd like to hear next. And please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen.